Hi everyone. As you may know, we are beginning the process of creating online videos that would allow us to train you virtually. So this is going to be a very informal, introduction into how we would like our trainings to be in the future. And I know that I need to get with you all in regards to the IEP. So I thought that this would be a great way to practice this method. And so what I've done is put together some really quick information on IEPs and what to expect as we have the drafts due coming up here shortly. For those of you that are new to the Lead Center and writing IEPs for the first time, one of the things that you'll notice is that we actually don't write the entire IEP. The way that we serve our customers is by providing them a written narrative present level of performance, measurable annual and short-term goals, a list of accommodations for each student, and a recommendation for placement. All of these things are what we include to our customer, and then they will then go back and put it into their computer system, which is typically like the SEAS system or IEP Online. So we need to provide detailed information that makes it easy for them to copy and paste into their computer system so that the completed IEP can then be present for the IEP meeting. Inside of our IEP folder on Lead 3, we have several documents that you can review that help you plan and prepare the present level of performance for the IEP. Now, this is hands down the most important part of the IEP, in my opinion. It is the narrative that describes the student. When we get a new student, it is the first thing that we look at to see what the student's strengths and weaknesses are with regard to academics and behavior. So, and it's also a good indicator of the type of school that the kid came from. It establishes credibility of the teacher and defines the type of program that the student was participating in, and then you can kind of compare what the teacher said their strengths and weaknesses were with the type of program that they were enrolled in, and then you can kind of judge a little bit of their character from that. So what you'll see is a document like this on Lead 3, and I'll try to put it up here for you as well. I basically have bulleted this out. For any that have completed college courses recently, this is very similar to just an outline that you need to follow for the written narrative of the present level of performance. You'll see at the top there's a section for a paragraph that you're going to write about a student interview that you have with that child. It's very important for you to ask the child what they like about school, what they don't like, things that engage them, things that they like to do at home, just so that we can try to find some leverage within the classroom. That is also valuable information to pass on if the student were to transition out. So do keep that in mind when you are doing your student interview and writing a 4 to 5 sentence paragraph about that. Then we have a topic for parental concerns. This is a piece of information that our customers will include in the factors for IEP team consideration. That's something that they do, but there are 11 factors for IEP team consideration. It talks about recent eligibility minutes, goals needed, if the student requires related services, if they require ESY, and there are several other points, but one of those is parental concerns, because we really want to give the parents a voice and we want them to buy into the IEP. So before you finish your present level of performance, be sure that you've made contact with the parents and have gotten their feedback on what they think is working and what isn't working. Be sure to ask them what they are working on at home, because we may be able to tie into one another and work together to accomplish the student's goals. The next section on the outline is for state assessment. This is where you want to document any type of SOL scores that we might have. This is especially pertinent for high schoolers, because we want to be able to quickly access the student's academic and diploma status. So have they or haven't they passed SOLs? Have they or haven't they passed previous courses? Where are they in that track to graduation? So this would be a great place for you to note SOL scores or progress. The next section is titled Social Skills and Functional Skills. This is where you want to talk about how the student interacts with staff, how they interact with their peers. Are there any accommodations that are needed for the child to be successful inside of a social situation? You'll see a number of bullets here. You want to make sure that you cover the majority of those inside of your narrative. The next section is communication needs. Is the student that you are writing the IEP for able to communicate his or her needs inside the classroom? If they are, great. Talk about what they're able to do. If they're not, then talk about any accommodations that may be needed. An example of this might be for a student inside of our multiple disabilities program or our intellectual disabilities program. Maybe they need picture communication cards to be prompted to communicate. I know we currently have a student inside of our ED classroom that has difficulty communicating verbally, mainly because of anxiety or just discomfort inside of social situations. So he is able to journal on a tablet or type out his responses to staff. So that might be something that's necessary to state in the IEP, just so that the receiving teacher has that information as well as the staff in the program. The next section is the related services section. This is where you want to talk about any services that the student may currently receive or need to receive based on recent eligibility minutes. This would include speech services, occupational services, physical therapy, or any hearing services. And you also will want to communicate with the related service provider because they will need to provide you with a narrative summarizing the student's performance as well as listing out any goals that he or she needs to work towards or try to attain in the upcoming IEP year. So be sure that you as the case manager are facilitating those meetings and making those related service professionals provide you with current documentation for the present level of performance. The assistive technology, this is where you want to discuss if your student requires assistive technology to access the general curriculum. Now we know every student would absolutely love to have a laptop or an iPad, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone gets one. This would need to be a recommendation from an educational evaluation or a psychological evaluation, as well as be documented inside of the eligibility minutes or in previous IEPs as a necessary accommodation for accessing the general curriculum. The next two sections are for math, reading, science, and history. You're going to want to be specific here. Be sure to look at and include SOL goals within the grade level that that student is enrolled in. List the SOL goals that they have mastered. List the ones that they are struggling with. And then you're going to want to outline which part of that SOL goal are they really having the most difficulty with. You want to be as detailed as possible. This is going to give you a current present level of performance, and then it's going to be a way that we can measure progress over the year. Also, areas that you note as weaknesses within these content areas are going to be what you write your goals around within the annual and short-term goals section. The next section is the behavior section. This is where you're going to want to talk about the student's identified disability. You're going to want to talk about how it manifests itself inside of the classroom. What could a teacher or staff member be looking for as an antecedent to the student's behavior? You're going to want to identify and write down clearly what the student's triggers are. If there are certain things inside of the classroom or certain ways that assignments can be structured to avoid these students' behaviors, then you're going to want to note that. This is kind of like a handbook section for the student. You're going to want to outline the weaknesses that they have specifically, the triggers they have specifically, and then any approaches that you and your team have come up with that have allowed you to successfully refocus the student despite them being frustrated in the classroom. Inside of the behavior section of the IEP, this is a great place to add in the data that we collect daily on our students. you are going to want to include the number of verbal comments that the students require inside of each JCAT category on average. So you would be able to open up our database and view the reports there. If you need help with that, please come see me, Perry, or Mr. Varick, and we'll be glad to help you with that. But this data is very, very important. One of the most important pieces of data that we collect is the number of verbal prompts required per day and the number of events where verbal prompts fail per day. This is going to be a really good indicator for the locality as to whether or not the student is ready to return to public school. And this is going to be really important when we get to that placement decision, because if your child is having 3 events per day where verbal prompts are failing and they have to be removed from the classroom, the public school may not be able to offer that level of support. And we have concrete data that implies that the student still requires a therapeutic day school setting. This also works on the other side for when we are attempting to return a student to public school. If we can prove with numerical data that the student has been able to manage their behavior, that they have not had any documented time out of program, then we would be able to support that student and let the receiving school know what to expect. This is really good, especially for students that come to us after having quite a negative reputation or perception from administration or teachers on the public school side. When we come at them with anecdotal information such as, oh, Johnny's been doing really good, that's not exactly reassuring to them. So what they like to hear is that actually on the last 30 observations inside of the classroom, we have documented 0 occurrences of aggression. That's a lot more affirming, a lot more concrete, and definitely a data-driven response to whether or not the child is ready to return to public school. The last section on the outline is the impact of the disability. This is where you're going to want to go pull from medical records. You're going to want to pull from the recent eligibility minutes and look at the identified disabilities. Why is this child receiving special education services? Is it due to other health impairment, emotional disabilities, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, or is there a medical diagnosis of ADHD or Klinefelter syndrome? Whatever it might be, you're going to want to spell it out clearly in this section, again, for the receiving teacher for the upcoming school year, or if this child does transition back mid-IEP year, this will be helpful information. So identify the disability, and then you want to clearly state how this disability is impacting them academically and behaviorally. Now, there is a lot of information that needs to be contained inside of the present level of performance, and it is of utmost importance that you write clearly and that what you say is stated positively. You are writing this child's story for others to read. So, if you have strong negative emotions, I ask that you check them prior to sitting down to draft your present level of performance. If you're having a difficult time phrasing something that the child does very negatively inside of the classroom, come see me. I'll help you rephrase it so that we can paint a positive picture of the student, but also still clearly point out their needs. For those serving students aged 14 and older, you are going to be asked to complete a transition survey. This is also something that's included in Lead on Lead 3 underneath of the IEP forms folder, so be sure to check that out. It is a 2-page document, and you'll see that inside of the folder, as I said. And it is basically a guide for you to communicate with the child to find out what their interests are. What do they want to be when they grow up? Where do they see themselves working? How do they see themselves living? Will they be with a roommate or with their parents? Or do they want to live independently? These kinds of discussions are going to help you identify transition goals for the student. If they want to go to college, we'll be able to identify inside of the goals section some short-term and long-term goals that they're going to need to accomplish in order to make that goal of going to college a reality. I will say, having done multiple transition assessments with our students, they tend to lean towards very simplified goals, such as, I want to be a rapper, or I want to be a basketball star one day. It's going to be incumbent upon you as the case manager and the teacher to encourage the student to draw out other opportunities for themselves. Not saying that those won't happen, but let's focus on some possible short-term attainable goals that they can reach. So what I'm saying is, don't settle for their simple answer. Make them dig a little deeper for what they want to be when they grow up. And you're probably going to need to speak a little bit of life into them. You know, say, hey, I see that you're really confident and you're really organized. Maybe you would be great at fill in the blank. So hone in on the student's strengths during the interview, encourage them, build them up, and then I think through your dialogue, you'll find some reasonable, attainable goals for them. And they'll also see that they have a supporter in the process. So far, we've talked about the present level of performance and the transition assessment. What I'm going to do is actually break this video into two parts, and so this concludes part one. You can look forward to part two, writing measurable annual and short-term goals for your students based on the present level of performance that you just wrote in part one.